events, and some of you will be looking forward to yours coming imminently. Give us a wave if you've already had a church visit from either an archdeacon or a rural dean. So a few of you, these people are experts. They will tell you what a great experience it was, how they were refreshed and rejuvenated in their ministry by all those kind of things which we take for granted. For those of you who haven't yet had the joy of one of these, this is meant to kind of give you just a few insights from what we've observed of the kind of 9 months or so that we've been doing them thus far. Reminder that there are two separate things. There's the articles of inquiry, which this year we did as an online form. Hopefully you saw that. And that's an annual thing. We ask every church. We don't need one from both of you if you've got a church warden colleague, but one from each church, really just giving us a sense of where you've got to with some basic legal requirements. It's largely a tick box thing. It takes about 10 minutes to fill in as long as you know the information in your head and haven't had to go and chase everything up. Next year it will only take you 10 minutes to do if it took you a bit longer this year. So expect those to come year after year, so we can kind of track as a diocese how we're getting on with some of the legal compliance that has already filled this morning's sessions. Church visits are meant to come around once every 3 years, and they will be conducted either by Alex or I or a rural dean church visit. It shouldn't take longer than that. And both of these are designed to support you. We're not coming to inspect you. We're not Ofsted or Churchstead or whatever it is. We're absolutely here to help you in your role. And if you've heard some stuff this morning that has left you feeling a bit anxious about your role, particularly that's what we want to do, to try and diminish that level of anxiety that goes with realising just how much responsibility falls on you as church wardens and as trustees of a charity. So here are some of the things that we've noticed in the visits that have happened so far. Generally, people are doing pretty well with safeguarding. The church has been on to safeguarding for a long time. Most of you are, very compliant with that. You may have got some reds on your dashboard, but of course they go red very easily, don't they? So in general, people are doing really well around that. You've evidenced that you've got your policies in place. Actually, most churches are growing numerically across the diocese. That may not be what you thought is happening, but actually the Church of England is growing by a few percentage nationally every year, and this diocese is no exception from that. More than half of our churches showed growth in the last year. So there is considerable numerical growth going on across the diocese. Generally with quinquennial inspections, your architect-led inspections, you're aware of those. People are starting to tick off, that bit at the back, do this year, do next year, do sometime never, those kind of things. You're getting on with those. Generally speaking, you've got some sensible financial procedures. They may not be written down, but the treasurer knows how it works. You as church warden knows how it works. That's not always the case, but broadly speaking, you've got financial procedures, even if they've not been written down anywhere. You've got your fire extinguishers, etc. You can read these. These are some of the things that generally are going well across the piece. This last one down here is worth mentioning. Clergy and church wardens meeting regularly. People tell us that that's what's happening. If that's not your experience, it's perfectly reasonable for you to ask your incumbent to say, it would be good for us to sit down just periodically, just us, not in a PCC meeting, but you and the church wardens to have a conversation. That's a perfectly reasonable request for you to make. What could go better? Well, these are some of the things that people have told us that they were struggling with. And they're not surprising, are they, really? Lack of volunteers for key roles, office holders like yourselves wearing more than one hat at the same time, so some of you may be treasurer as well as church warden. Occasionally we've got clergy who are having to be parish safeguarding officers. These kind of conflicts that are ideally separated out, but sometimes you're having to juggle several of them. You're all doing lots of jobs. Administration, not many parishes are able to pay somebody to do that, so it's falling on you and clergy in particular. Too many forms to fill in, everybody says that, I'm sorry about that. Net zero. So the first presentation we heard this morning, on the whole, churches are really struggling to get into net zero. Some of you are absolutely forging ahead with that, but for many churches it feels like it's the latest demand. We haven't got round to it then. Several of them said, what's PPNZ? Practical Path to Net Zero. We've never heard of it. Now you have heard of it, you know what it is, so you won't be able to use that excuse when we come round to you. But nonetheless, it's a really important thing, and churches are universally struggling with it, or not mostly struggling with it. Fragile work with young people, our diocesan strategy, or the one that we're kind of trialling out at the moment, is going to be focusing on that amongst other things. So we are mindful of the need for resourcing and support around work with young people.
So what does fragile mean in that context?
It means that churches that used to run young people's work, often lots of them haven't been able to, or everything's one volunteer deep, so it only needs one person to move or go off sick, and you can't run. So it's fragile in that sense that it's not, there's no sustainability at any depth there. Big projects are often the final straw. You know the church roof needs doing, but you want your successor to do it. That kind of thing. So it's just too much for us. Those are some of the things that you've flagged up. In no particular order, then, other things that we've noticed as we've gone around is that most of you know those posters, that either whether they're safeguarding posters or your insurance policy poster or your license to your CCL license in terms of being able to project words and so on. Those are generally up on notice boards. They're quite visible. Some of them maybe not quite so up to date. There is a whistleblowing poster that's out and about that is not always up to date. It's been revised in the latest suite, so you need to just check that what you've got up as a whistleblowing poster actually is the up-to-date one. Many of you are in the habit of putting up PCC minutes and agendas. You don't have to do that by law, but it's one way that people show their communities what the PCC gets up to, what it's there, what it thinks. AGM notices and so on. You're used to doing those, broadly speaking. What isn't always great is legibility. If your building is damp, it's not long before posters start to become illegible, or you don't update the names from one year to the next of who your safeguarding officer is, or whatever. Victim helplines. One of the recommendations around safeguarding is that you have a set of, and of course they're local, so we can't produce them for everywhere in the diocese, because if you're in Norfolk, you've got different victim health lines than if you're in southern Cambridge and whatever. So the recommendation is that you have some of the most common areas for domestic abuse victims or people in need of other kind of helpline available on the back of a toilet door if you have a toilet. For some of you that would be a luxury. Otherwise somewhere else in the church, so that people have got a sense of where they might get help if they've come in seeking help. Emergency vehicle contact details, which is just basically your postcode and ideally your what 3 words address, so that emergency vehicles can find you, because if they go on Google Maps and put in St Mary's Church, they could end up anywhere in the country, couldn't they? So you being able to tell them exactly where to find you if you need an emergency vehicle. And the other thing interesting is that people think that notice boards don't need a faculty because you can pick them up and move them around, which is probably true. But it also means that you tend to get the ones the school doesn't think are safe any longer. They pass them down the road to you, and you're now leaving them where people are going to grab hold of them, support, children are going to knock them over. So is your notice board actually one of the risks that you need to think about under your health and safety risk assessment? Obvious things, but there they go. When we get to the kind of people section, so the first thing we want to know in the visit is, how's it going for you as churchwardens? How is it for the clergy that you're in close relationship with? What's the congregational well-being? That's a kind of very soft conversation earlier on. But when we get into slightly more measurable things, here are some of the things that have come up for some parishes to follow up. Contracts. People have often got a cleaner or an organist who's been around since Noah came out of the ark, or it seems that way. And nobody has ever sat down and written a contract for them or got them to sign it. And the excuse is often, well, they're self-employed. We don't have to have a contract with them. But there's no clarity about why or at what point your relationship with them might end and on what grounds it might end. So they've got a kind of arrangement, an employment type relationship with you without any sense of where the boundaries are. So it should be coming under safer recruitment, how you end up with people in those kind of roles. Sometimes people think it's exceptional. If this organist doesn't stay with us, then we're going to be having to hum along to the tunes or whatever it is. But please don't consider anybody outside of the safer recruitment process. How's it going for you as churchwardens? How is it for the clergy that you're in close relationship with? What's the congregational well-being? That's a kind of very soft conversation earlier on, but when we get into slightly more measurable things, here are some of the things that have come up for some parishes to follow up. Contracts. People have often got a cleaner or an organist who's been around since Noah came out of the ark, or it seems that way. And nobody has ever sat down and written a contract for them or got them to sign it. And the excuse is often, well, they're self-employed. We don't have to have a contract with them. But there's no clarity about why or at what point your relationship with them might end and on what grounds it might end. So they've got a kind of arrangement, an employment type relationship with you without any sense of where the boundaries are. So it should be coming under safer recruitment, how you end up with people in those kind of roles. Sometimes people think it's exceptional. If this organist doesn't stay with us, then we're going to be having to hum along to the tunes or whatever it is. But please don't consider anybody outside of the safer recruitment process. You'll find that the diocese has put together a whole set of template policies around behaviour policies, we've called them, or relating well together policies, they're also called. And amongst those are a code of conduct, a bullying and harassment policy, which is obligatory if you employ anybody. And so, as Manny was saying earlier, that kind of grey area between are churches employers or not starts to touch into this. One of the most common concerns that comes to our safeguarding team that's below a kind of straightforward safeguarding issues around bullying and harassment in churches. I'm not sure whether it's worse now than it's been in the past, but people are more aware of it, perhaps now than they were in the past, and more likely to say, I'm not putting up with this, what are you going to do about it? But that probably first comes to you or the parish priest, but it might end up on Alex or I's doorstep or wherever. If you haven't got a policy, where do you stand on this? And the other advantage of a policy is helping you to be clear what begins to look like bullying and harassment and what is something else than that. So having a look at that one, a complaints policy, again, the Charity Commission requires charities to have a procedure by which complaints are heard and investigated. There is a template complaints policy. Lots of PCCs haven't had a chance yet to pick that up. It's very simple. It's about 3 pages. It just helps you to think about the structure of dealing with those complaints that inevitably come. Whether it's to do with the churchyard or whether it's to do with what the youth worker said or didn't say or whatever it is, one's procedure that you will follow through that. The other one is around health and safety training. So if you've got volunteers, do they, and you've started to produce policies, how do you communicate the policies and procedures that you've got to the volunteers, whether they're doing flowers or youth work? Toilets are another area that comes up quite a lot. The most common one is that there is no way of summoning assistance if somebody was to have a fall or a stroke or an accident in your your toilet and they need to get help. So the organ is playing away and somebody is desperately trying to summon help from the toilet because they went in there 3 hours ago and nobody's noticed that they didn't come back out again. So how on earth would they summon help? Lots of toilets were installed a decade or a few decades ago. There's a step in them, and bizarrely people seem to use them as a place to put everything that you don't want on public display. So there's a toilet with a decent turning circle, except it's full of chairs, tables, mops and buckets and all kinds of other things, including cleaning products that are accessible to any children that might be using the toilet or going in there. So toilets have been one of the areas that have been very fruitful for Alex and I. And so sounds like wrong, doesn't it? But nonetheless, have a look at them. Just wander into your church toilet if you've got one, and think, how is somebody with if somebody falls in here, how are they going to get help? How are we going to get in? You know, are you able to unlock the door from outside? How are they going to summon our assistance? If they find themselves disabled in some way, how are they going to get off the toilet? See, all of those things that a modern toilet would be automatically equipped with, just because yours was put in 20 years ago, doesn't mean we can ignore it. Let's see about how we can bring it as close to modern standards as you can without having to go the whole way through a faculty process at this stage or very expensive changes. And just a reminder that if you've got a toilet, it's a great place to put those kind of safeguarding, whistle-blowing posters on the back of the door. Extra heating. We all need extra heating. Churches on the whole, so we've heard talk about heating people rather than the building. People have different ways of heating people. Okay, it's not uncommon if you are one of those churches that needs a bit of extra heating that you bring in anything you can find that's going to make the difference between sub-zero and slightly above zero temperatures. They come with them all kinds of training issues. Of course, you remove them when Alex or I are coming because we can freeze and we don't want us to see what you've been using the other 51 weeks of the year. But it happens. So please, think about those. If you're plugging things in, think about the electric load. In one of my churches, we had a fire because heating systems had changed and it hadn't been kind of thought the whole way through, or some of the 1960s cabling wasn't up to the extra load on it, so it smelt of fish for about 3 weeks before it actually burst into flames. We probably should have guessed that a fishy smell really was a fishy smell, but there you go. So think about trailing cables, electric load. If you are using propane things, where are you storing it? It's going to produce condensation when you use it. And clearly it's going to be hot to touch, and you might have children wandering around or people who are less firm on their feet. You'll notice this one is cunningly next to an unmarked step as well to make it a completely perfect pattern for everybody. So extra heating. We want extra heating, but we don't want to kill people in the process. The other thing that happens around churches is people don't like throwing stuff away. Or people will give you stuff, granny's died, please have this stuff that you don't really want. So we could almost do, can you spot what's right about this picture rather than what's wrong about this picture? I apologise if you find yourself up on this screen. Yeah, chairs, very useful to hide chairs somewhere down there. Nobody will want to sit on these chairs or be associated with them ever in the future, but nonetheless, they're there, they're in the church, you don't know what to do with them, so shove them in a corner alongside previous incumbents. I guess that was a previous incumbent, who may be buried there for all I know, but at the moment his picture's there. So, clutter. Chief amongst the clutter is old furniture. Pews that you took out, you got a temporary, somebody more than 2 years ago got temporary permission to remove a pew, and as you know, you're not allowed to chuck the pew away because it's a temporary permission. You forgot that it was only covered you for 24 months. Now nobody knows what to do with the pew, so it's shoved in the corner. It's not safe to sit on, although there's no notice saying please don't sit on the pew, but everybody knows not to sit on the pew because you can see that it's got a rotten leg, it's going to give way, if whatever. So please, if you've got this kind of clutter, think about how to get rid of it. It probably needs a faculty to get rid of it. Well, it does if it's a pew. Other things probably arrived without a faculty and can go without a faculty. But you know, if it looks as though it was probably meant to be there at some point, almost certain you're going to need a faculty to get rid of it. Please, I know it's a lot of work, but it means that you're not holding all that damp, all of the pests that are in there, and the smell that goes with damp food. So if you can get rid of it, get rid of it. Don't put it in front of a fire escape or any other way where it's just cluttering up the space. Were you going to?
I was just going to say, I've got a beer.
You've got a beer. We'll come back to beers in a bit. Okay.
Everyone always says, well, you can't get rid of them because they've always been there.
Okay. Well, you can get rid of them, but you need a faculty if it's been around any length of time. It's probably better to ask for a faculty than just clear it out yourself. Yeah, so another example. So a church was installing a server at the back, moved the older pews, because they've got historic value, up to the front, so they end up cluttering the sanctuary and bits dropping out. This is one solution that I don't recommend. If you've got, just stack the furniture on top of each other, and then you've got more floor space. Just don't let anybody anywhere near the things. But this is one use for your beer, okay? Hold the tables and the other chairs on top of it. It'd be best if it probably didn't. More generally speaking, accessibility. Able-bodied people tend to assess whether a building's accessible or not. So, you know, why not ask somebody with some kind of accessibility issues to come and move round the building with you and do your assessment of how accessible your building really is. Because you often find that that bit of furniture that you haven't got the faculty yet to remove then blocks up the aisles, so you can get through it sideways, but there's absolutely no way that somebody in a wheelchair is going to get through that space. So think about that. So lots of unmarked steps. Our buildings were built with steps in it. You know, it accentuated the importance of the mass or getting up to the pulpit or whatever it is, but they are incredible hazards. So how do you highlight that there is a step there? The fact that everybody's known about it because it's been there for 500 years doesn't make it any less of a hazard for either your regulars or new people coming in, and particularly right in the middle of the aisle, you're going up for communion or whatever, and how many steps on the way, and no grab rails on that. So how can you mitigate the risks around that? Some churches position somebody by the step so that there's somebody to hold on to if you need a bit of help. But you can install a handrail, or you can put a visual marker. You know, as our eyesight begins to fade, then our ability to distinguish changes in surface level becomes less. So all of those trip hazards, as well as the inevitable uneven floors. Many churches now have a notice as you go in, beware of the uneven floors. It may appear to be stating the obvious, but it's only obvious to us because we're used to it. It's not necessarily obvious to people who are coming in for the first time. Lots of places have got ramps, but they're way too steep. Put a wheelchair on them and they'll zip across the road and into the next garden or something. So thinking about that. Or ramps that haven't got edges. So people can drop off them. Children don't know whether they're safe to go up or not. Toilets often not accessible for people who are in a wheelchair or whatever. And paths with loose chippings. All of these things. You know these things, and you've kind of got them in the back of your head, and you're tempted to say, well, it's not our job. Somebody else put this ramp in. Somebody else decided the path was going to be loose chippings. Not my responsibility. But unfortunately it is. It's on your watch now. And so you thinking about how do we mitigate this, make it our building more accessible. The estimation is that something like 25% of the population have some kind of a disability. Now, so this is not a minority interest, making our buildings accessible. It's getting to the point where or maybe almost a majority interest, but it's clearly our responsibility, isn't it? I'll say a bit more about fire exits later on. Slips, trips, falls, You can go on the ecclesiastical insurance website and download some guidance on slips, trips and falls, because obviously they're very used to dealing with claims on the grounds of slips, trips and falls. They happen all over the place. I've picked out some of the things, but this was one of my particular favourites. So this is a staircase that goes nowhere, as lots of staircases in churches do. Very tempting for a child, and absolutely nothing to indicate that you shouldn't go up it, bungee jump out of it, or all of those things. So, again, those bits of the building that you're so familiar with, how do you flag up that these are no-go areas or they lead nowhere? Very helpful. Entrances, exits. Mention some of these. Heavy doors. Churches come with heavy doors, don't they? But their heavy doors are really uninviting. If you're wondering about going into a church for the first time, if all you encounter is a great steel encased door that takes two people to open it, it's not a very welcoming aspect to your church. So how can you mitigate the presence of a heavy door on a Sunday morning when there's a cold wind blowing, as well as your uneven pathways? One of the things you might do is flag up on your website the accessibility of your building. So somebody who turns up is prepared for the obstacles that they might face to get into your church in the first place. And people who are, using a wheelchair would routinely expect to be able to go to your website and know whether your building is accessible to them, rather than having to turn up on Sunday and find out by trial and error. So if you can't change the building, then change the website so it's obvious to people that you've got plans and hopes to make your building more accessible, but you haven't managed to overcome them yet, or at least you can overcome some accessibility issues, but not yet others. You might also make somebody particularly responsible for meeting and greeting at the end of the church pathway, ensuring that people have got a hand to hold on to, an arm to hold on to, as they travel, navigate the obstacles to getting in to worship God with you on a Sunday morning or evening. Doors. You'd be surprised how many doors actually lead nowhere or lead to a further locked door. In the event of a fire, how do people know which door is going to lead them into the vestry and there's no other way out of it, and which ones actually get them outside and away from the fire? You are allowed to put up a fire escape sign on a door without asking for a faculty permission for it. If you're going to wire it in, it's going to be, an illuminating one. You'll need to get a faculty permission. If you're just sticking a green running person emblem onto your door, then just get on and do it tomorrow, please, so people know how they get out of the building. I'll come back to things that you absolutely have to do, but thinking about your fire exits, your signage of them, and the ability then for people to open them when they're designated as escape routes. Places you never thought it was meant to go. Some of it's going in the right place, but then it won't go away anywhere. It just pools there for ages. Maybe some of you have actually got a rainwater system that works and gets the water away from your building as quickly as possible. But that's probably a rarity rather than a norm. Sometimes these are really quick win things about just unblocking some blocked up downpipes or leaves in the gutters up the top, or something that you can do with some rods to clear out the drains beneath it. But that getting of water away is often what's causing the green mould that you're seeing inside your buildings, leaving weeds growing up in your French drains if you've got those. All of those kind of simple maintenance tasks, if you can keep on top of them, you might keep the damp from getting worse in the buildings that you've got. Ivy, you can strip, you don't need a faculty to strip ivy off things. And even whilst you're waiting for faculty consent, if you are trying to alter your pipe, just doing something that pulls the water a bit further away from the base of the walls so that it doesn't all end up there, overwhelming your drainage systems, is worth having a look at. We talked a bit about churchyards, this sense of whether a churchyard is open or closed. Meaning, is it being closed by Privy Council, or is it just closed in the sense that you don't use it any longer? And that leads you down different routes. If it's closed by Privy Council, then you are able to ask the local authority to take on the maintenance. They don't automatically do it, you have to ask for that. If they take it on, they become responsible for the maintenance of the grass, the maintenance of the trees, and the maintenance of the walls. And churchyard walls can be an incredible expense, and nobody will give you a grant to amend the churchyard wall because nobody's interested in them. But they're your responsibility, and they cost you thousands of pounds. So alongside the what about where are future people going to be buried is the impact on your PCC's finance of having to look after these churchyards that you're keeping open for 1 or 2 burials a year that could be costing you thousands of pounds per year to keep open. So is this the time to close it, hand all that responsibility on? But then it goes to the district council, through the parish councils, and usually to the district council. And as you know, we're into local government reorganisation and the district councils. Some of them are really good at this, some of them are not really good at this. And who knows what the replacement for district councils are going to be after we've been reorganised. Nonetheless, working out which of these categories you fall into. Is it solely the PCC's responsibility to look after this? Is it closed and it could be local authority? Is it the local authority but you're still the owner of it, and so you have that kind of shared responsibility that Susan was talking about earlier? Just clarifying all that for your own sake, especially if you've got more than one churchyard, and some of you have got more than one churchyard, one parish with more than one churchyard that you're responsible for. Insurance companies are becoming really interested in trees because trees have been falling on people. So your insurance company wants to know whether the trees have been surveyed in your churchyard. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a professional come in every year. You might do initially, and certainly if you've got concerns about a tree, but often it's just you and I wandering around looking at the health of trees. If they look as though they're struggling, you may want to get a professional to come in and give you an assessment. Often a tree surgeon will do it for nothing because they're hopeful of getting the business, but you might want to fact check what they tell you against another tree surgeon, for instance. So you are meant to be surveying the trees in your churchyard every year. Often trees have been put in there without permission. We're not expecting you to chop them down, but just if you've got an invasive species, Leylandi, getting rid of them would be an asset to everybody. So think about that. Getting them pruned might be your responsibility. If they're too close to the walls of the church or the churchyard, they'll be damaging both of those. So again, that would be grounds for you to ask for a faculty. You can't do anything substantial to your trees without faculty permission, again, I'm afraid, so you have to go through that system unless it's really simple stuff. Yes?
You're implying, forgive me if I misunderstood you don't need professional surveys. I believe you do.
Okay.
The insurance company will not cover you unless a professionally qualified person who says when the frequency should be. I think that's
okay.
important.
Thank you. I stand corrected.
No,
no, check it out, but we're erring on the side of a professional doing it and then giving you a kind of schedule of when in the future. I would follow that advice.
Richard, just to add to that point, and an issue that we've got at the minute in one of our churches is you'll find that a lot of your trees have probably got tree preservation orders on TPOs, and the councils certainly Peterborough Council is very, very, you can't touch kind of anything without a survey, and even then they probably won't let you touch it, but bear that one in mind. You might not know who these trees are. Chances are a lot of the trees, even if they're in your own land, will have TPOs on, and you could be fined if you so much as look at it the wrong way.
So trees, lots of worries about those. This photo is from the damage that was done by an oil tanker delivering oil and driving over a grave. So thinking about those kind of delivery, if you have to bring heavier vehicles onto your churchyard to get deliveries to your church. Those kind of areas of access and safety there. I'm not asking you to comment on whether the yellow tape is well secured or not. There we go. We talked about gravestones, or Susan has done, walls. Often they're in a terrible state, churchyard walls. And as I say, they're not sexy. Nobody wants to give you money to repair them. So you're trying to work out, are they a health and safety hazard? Is this something that's kind of low down our list of priorities or high up them? The advantage of having Alex or I or Rural Dean come and walk there with you is that we'll try and reach some kind of common sense on it together. Please don't hide stuff from us deliberately. We're not the police. We're trying to support you in terms of identifying what your priorities might be and what do you tackle first. Well, there we go. So picture on the right speaks for itself. You never know what biodiversity you've got in the church. That was from one of the church visits earlier on. But quite simple solutions. Just change biodiversity a little bit. You don't need permission to put a bee house up. You do for Swift boxes, but it's only Alex and I's permission. So if you want to increase diversity, it's a relatively easy thing to do. You're not necessarily having to get the Chancellor's permission to do all of that. Some things that I really would urge you to do as quick wins before we arrive. A fire audit. This is a legal requirement for every public building. EIG have got a document on their website, a fire audit or risk assessment, it's the same thing, that fill it in as your first step in checking that your building is as well prepared for fire, or you are as well prepared for fire as you can be. A health and safety risk assessment. You may not have a health and safety policy. The risk assessment is the really important bit. A policy would be great, but the risk assessment is what Manny was talking about. And again, you can download a large church or a small church template policy for you from the EIG website, or in that great folder of policies and procedures that we sent out to you about 9 months ago.
What's EIG?
Ecclesiastical Insurance Group. And you'll find there's a church section on there, and you can get them. You can find them on the Dawson website, but it's probably easier to go directly to source. And they also have a tree survey template document for you too. So those three things are, I would say, get them today if you haven't already done them, and get a working party, maybe a couple of you and somebody else, start working on them, and then just work through the actions as they present themselves from those risk assessments. If you do nothing else from today, those three documents would be good places to start. Yes?
For the fire evacuation drill, how far away from the building does your congregation point have to be so that you do the fire drill, and where does everybody know how far away?
I don't know the answer. Does anybody know the answer to that? Is there a legal position about how far away?
Every down to your own assessment, basically, every single building will have a different place, and you've just got to assess where you think the fire's most likely to be, where the emergency vehicles will come in, where it's safe to congregate, where you put your signs. There's lots of reasons, no specific distance.
And the other thing you want to do is to make sure that you are not in the way of the fire appliance coming in.
Yeah, so not right at the entrance to the car park. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Not out immediately out the front, either door.
At a previous church, we had a sort of within the church grounds at its furthest distance point, but we then had a backup thought in our heads so that if the fire in the building was absolutely magnificent, we had a place over the road where we actually took people, as a safer distance. So just
Our
much faster at
safest,
night.
biggest place would be right at the back, but then we'd all be trapped
Doesn't work.
that side of the room to go home or anywhere else. The fire was all put out, so if it raged for hours,
Yeah.
and then like at the front we're just straight onto a really narrow street.
The issue with congregation, gathering places is if you don't know who came into the building, you don't know who's come out. Well, you know who's come out of it, but you can't measure it. So in some senses, they're a bit academic if you don't have any idea of who like you did today, you signed in and then you're signed out of the building. But we don't do that in most of our churches, so there's a little bit of an academic issue about that. But nonetheless, at least if you've got everybody together, hopefully you can do a kind of an informal assessment. Who thinks who's missing? Why can't we find them? Those kind of issues. Yes.
We've actually assigned someone to check the toilet and the other room that isn't the main bit of our building.
So like a fire warden, effectively,
Yeah.
for when you're using the building. We'll come back, we'll do a kind of pooling of ideas and things as we go on. So next one I'm going to is complaint policy. You're going to need it sooner or later, so get it written down. It's policy and procedure. It's fairly easy, the template to follow. Next thing I would look at is your hire agreements with user groups, particularly around safeguarding arrangements. So lots of churches have multiple different people using them at different points in the week. Are you sure that you're on an up-to-date version of a hire agreement with them, so you're really clear where your responsibilities stop around health and safety and around safeguarding, and that's agreed on both sides of that. Next, I'd look at your bullying and harassment policy, just because it's just a growing area of concern around churches generally. If you've done all of those ones, then some other things I'd kind of look at are your contracts, reviewing contracts generally, writing down your financial controls, particularly around internet banking. Now, finding a bank that wants to take on a charity account like yours is kind of like hen's teeth, really, is we're finding that banks are making it harder and harder for PCCs to hold accounts with them, so you might need to get into that. They're wanting to charge you for it. But if you're sticking with your current bank, at least making sure you're as safe and secure all of your PCC members, and particularly your financial officers, have got safe and secure things. We're seeing scams, of course, increasingly targeting churches. Checking your GDPR, we all did that when it first came back in 10 years ago. Is it still up to date? Are you holding on to information for the right length of time? Do you know when to get rid of it and destroy it? Get somebody to go on a first aid and a food handling course. You can get them. You can access these for free. There are organisations offering free courses in those, so get yourselves on a network to find out about those. Clear your gutters. Well, you can see what it says there. Those would be some of my quick wins on this, and some places to get help. Thank you.